Video games are a unique form of art. They're both experiences, but also something that the audience can still detach from. A mix of simulation, input, and animation all rolled up into one crazy burrito of an experience. And of course, with such an art form, one that you absolutely have to get to know, learn its ways in order to get the full intended artistic statement, I think it's safe to say that practically everyone has at least one favorite video game. Maybe your most important gaming experience was playing Halo Reach on Xbox Live with your friends after school. Or maybe you were that guy just waiting to get home to play World of Warcraft after work. Or maybe you were the person that only had the arcade to rely on for your gaming fix. The truth of the matter is that all those experiences are equally special, but also inherently unique when going from person to person. And that integral aspect of every video game is what makes fighting games one of the most unique genres in the entire medium. They're inherently built to be played with other people, to form a connection with others. Maybe it's a deep friendship or a long-standing rivalry, or just a quick online match with some random guy you'll never beat again. But it'll always be you and your distinct style of playing versus one other person and their unique playstyle. Sure, some games may twist the formula and allow teams or swapping between players, but that core experience is built around you and your connection with your opponent. It's an incredibly hard genre to develop for, needing a lot of micromanaging, attention to detail, and an intense understanding of how people will use strategy. And all that has to be portrayed to your player in a match that usually stops under 3 minutes. So that brings me to a big question. Or I guess the big question. What game does this the best? To many, it may be a question that feels unnecessary. But to some, it's a completely legitimate question. Everyone will have different answers, but mine? Well, my answer has always been pretty easy for me. And that's because Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is the greatest fighting game ever made. Hey everyone, it's Noah Nugent here, and today I've got a very special video cooked up, so I hope you enjoy it. So anyways, Marvel, Capcom, safe to say that both of these companies are basically household names at this point. I'd like to assume that most people watching this video are already familiar with the iconic Marvel vs. Capcom franchise, but just in case some of you are new to this, allow me to give you a lay of the land. On one side, we have Marvel Comics. Now, superhero comics have been around since the 1930s, and debatably longer than that depending on what you actually count as a superhero. And Marvel is one of the big two of the superhero comics industry, as well as Western comics in general. Of course, the other being their rival DC Comics. We're currently still in a big superhero age. They're basically all over our media, and of course, the people who bring this to life were the people at the iconic company Marvel Comics. And they've been a reliable brand for your superhero fix for decades, with a large collection of great comic series, great films, and even incredible games. In a post-Marvel Cinematic Universe world, I think it'd be even more surprising if you hadn't heard of Spider-Man, Iron Man, Wolverine, Captain America, and the many other characters that they made popular over the past couple years. On the other side, we have Capcom. Capcom has been a landmark company in the gaming scene since the early days, existing since the early arcade days and still finding ways to push the medium forward despite being around for 40 years. Capcom has a massive number of video game franchises and even straight up creating a few game genres. I mean, these are the guys that literally created the fighting game genre as we know it today, starting with Street Fighter II in the early 90s, on top of creating the action game genre with Devil May Cry and even setting early foundations for the survival horror genre with Resident Evil, and doing a lot more than that. And that leads to a crazy, quirky idea both companies came to. What if we combined these two companies and their characters into one big fighting game? Think of it, combining the print and the digital, East and West, science and magic, matter and antimatter. Okay, maybe I went a bit overboard, but I think you get the idea. This game is just one of a kind. even in comparison to the same games in its series that came before it and after. I don't think many games can even come close to its level of quality. Of course, the series doesn't literally start with Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 because, there's a 3 there, which means it's the third one. Never mind. The series originally started with Street Fighter vs. X-Men, and then Street Fighter vs. Marvel Superheroes, then Marvel vs. Capcom, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and then we make it to our third entry. Now, I think I've made it very clear by this point, but I absolutely love this game. But I think before we get into speaking more on the game, I should give my personal story to explain where I'm coming from. When I was young, my mom would occasionally take us out on shopping trips. We didn't really have a lot of money, so she'd take us around the city and go to shopping malls, and we'd get to buy at least one thing, or sometimes multiple things, but usually one. Mind you, these weren't big things like a new console, but smaller, nicer things like a new book, some new shirts, maybe a toy. And I always deeply appreciated that she always left just enough money over on the side so that we could do this at least once a year. There was one year, I think I was about 13 or 14, and I was determined just to get one thing. Just one singular game on my PS3. We scoured every gaming store we knew of, every GameStop, every retro gaming store, until we finally found it. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And it's been a major part of my collection ever since. Maybe that story sounds hokey or stupid, or maybe even unreal to other people. I mean, to most people, it seems kind of weird to have such a deep connection with a fighting game. There's no story, no super in-depth customization, none of that. It's just pick up and play. And well, I wanted it because it just seems so fun. Like it'd be the perfect game for me. And I was right. I guess this whole section here is just for me to give you an understanding of where I'm coming from, because this game is incredibly special to me. It sits in that very small collection of games that I've played that I can say made me into the person I am. That collection of games is probably going to appear somewhere on screen right now, and I know that's a bigger collection than you think it will be, but I spent a lot of my childhood playing video games, reading books, watching film and TV, a lot of inside activities. But what makes UMVC3 so special to me is that it was one of those few games that I could play with my friends. It allowed me to make connections. It was a way for me to get friends into my interests or learn of my interests in a safe and fun environment. So, yeah, it means a lot to me. But let's get this long intro out of the way and get into the history of the game. Hey, before we get any further, my analytics tell me that about 95% of my viewers aren't subscribed. Look, I don't really like when YouTubers do this either, but maybe think about subscribing if you like the video, and check out some of my other videos too. I'm hoping to at least make it past the 500 subscriber mark soon, and I hope you can help me do that. It genuinely helps and makes me happy because I don't really make money on these videos whatsoever. They're mostly just done as a passion project, but if I could make money on these videos and you'd help me get there, I'd really appreciate it. And hey, maybe once I hit about 1,000 subscribers, I'll try and make a big special video. But sorry for the interruption. On with the video. Obviously, the Ultimate version of this game is not the first release. It was originally released as Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds, released February 11th, 2011. The Ultimate version is an updated release with even more characters, stages, balance patches, and more that was released November 15th, 2011. The whole updating a game with patches thing wasn't really an industry standard thing up to this point. Sometimes you get an updated version of a game that released instead of a game that's just patched over time. Look at how there's 3 versions of Street Fighter 4 you can play on console. Basically, if a new version of a game was released with a new descriptor like Gold, Ultimate, Super, Ultra, etc., that was your update. This game was released in a very interesting time for both companies. For Marvel, the MCU was still in its infancy. The Avengers wouldn't have been released until almost a year after Ultimate Marvel 3. The biggest film they had on their belt was Iron Man and maybe the first Captain America. This was also years before the Disney buyout at Marvel, so we wouldn't have to deal with the character cutting issues that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite had. Capcom was experiencing an interesting time as well. The earlier half of the 7th generation of consoles was doing quite well for them. Street Fighter 4 was a mega success, they had a decent follow-up to Resident Evil 4 with RE5, Dead Rising was a new fan favorite, and they absolutely rushed Devil May Cry 4 out the door. But for both companies, things are looking up. And thus, at a time where both companies were finding new success, why not collaborate? The crazy thing about all this is that the game started development way back in 2008. and legal discussions about rights were happening even before that. Discussions for character selection was a pretty straightforward but also laborious task. The process went something more or less like this. Marvel would send Capcom a list of characters they wanted to see, either because they were getting big in movies or were making big moves in the comics. Capcom would then either send notes back explaining why a character would or wouldn't work. Usually a character would be rejected because they wouldn't work gameplay-wise or just wouldn't add much to the game as a whole, which is completely reasonable taking into consideration just how insane some characters are in this game. Apparently, the team built MVC's gameplay on the idea of maximizing depth while minimizing complexity. Basically, making the game have tons of things you can do without ever having to learn anything too insane like pretzel motions or learning exact frame data for certain moves. Though, during the development of the Ultimate update for MVC3, they experienced a bit of an issue. The entire roster was leaked online way beforehand because, yeah, the internet has been a nuisance to people since the invention of it. Everything in the Ultimate Edition was actually planned to be added on as DLC to the original MVC3. But the massive earthquake and tsunami that struck Japan that same year forced them to change their direction entirely. In fact, the only characters that were ever DLC in this game were Jill Valentine and Shuma Gorath. Part of me wonders what it would have been like if all the added characters of the game were made as DLC like traditionally planned, but I think this decision was for the better taking their circumstances into consideration. If anything, this shows just how tenacious and strong the developers at Capcom were. They took a heavy disaster and decided to work around it. It's hard to make anything after such a big disaster happens, but the fact that they pushed through and made something that gave so many people joy for years, it just says a lot about them. I should also add here, when Capcom released the Ultimate Edition of Marvel 3, they actually released it at a discounted price of $40 instead of the traditional $60 at the time. They did this because in their eyes, it was a large update to the game and thus wasn't worth charging a full price for. Wow, a company being reasonable with their prices? That's unheard of nowadays. Insert the Switch too. If you actually want a phenomenal video on not only the development history of UMVC3 but also the game's impact on the fighting game community, and the general gaming landscape, I heavily recommend watching 10 More Years, the Marvel vs. Capcom 3 story, by the YouTuber Carnage. Seriously, he does way more research than I probably could ever do in this video. If you love Marvel vs. Capcom or just want a great documentary style video, I highly recommend it. Though, I think that's all the backstory I could feasibly give in this video without making this video way longer than it probably already is. I think it's a great time to talk about the game's strengths. I think the first thing that will become apparent when you start your journey is the roster of this game. Just look at it. There's so much to pick from here. There's a little something for everyone. You want your goofy fun characters? Well, you've got Deadpool, Dante, Frank West, Phoenix Wright, and so on. You want to play some serious guys? Then you could choose from Wolverine, Virgil, Zero, Doctor Doom, and so on. And don't even get me started on how every character has a completely unique playstyle. The roster is so great because the characters you choose to have on your team are an extension of yourself. It allows for a lot of self-expression, like if you choose to have MODOK on your team, I'm either going to assume you're a goofy guy, or probably like to projectile spam, or for some reason really like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I also love that the Marvel side of the roster isn't appealing exclusively to the MCU, and really only to Marvel films in general. This is a very Marvel Comics roster. It pulls in a lot of more popular characters, but also some deep cuts. I could probably name the amount of people I knew in real life who had even heard of X-23 before this game, or probably the movie Logan. Though, don't misunderstand me, there's still quite a few MCU picks here. Or well, picks that would have appealed to the MCU pre-Avengers. Don't really expect to find the big hits of the later MCUs like Black Panther, Groot, or Winter Soldier, but you'll still find a lot to love about the Marvel side of the roster if you are an MCU fan. Hell, you might even be surprised at how differently some characters act before the MCU, like Rocket for some reason having a Cockney British accent. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but as a big Guardians of the Galaxy fan, I think most people now expect Rocket's voice to have a sort of New Yorker or New Jersey accent. Also, I do wonder how fans of Thor in the films would react to a completely Shakespearean Thor like he is here and in the earlier comics. I mean, I've always liked it, but it'll probably be a major shock to you if you've never experienced that. Of course, the Capcom side of the roster is nothing to overlook either. Hell, I'd say even for today, this roster is almost perfect if you're a big Capcom fan like me. Now, obviously there are some major characters and franchises missing that got really big around the same time or after the fact, but you should also keep in mind that most of the development for this game was around 2008 to 2010. It's got enough fan favorites and deep cuts for the old heads, but also would have been accommodating to the new fans at the time. My only minor gripe is that there's very little representation of the Fantastic Four outside of Doctor Doom and Super Skrull, but that's more of a problem with the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise as a whole. I think there's 3 words I would describe UMVC's gameplay with: insane, bombastic, and technical. It's a game that feels like it's showing you all the rules of how to use it, and once you learn how to do that, you can do some insane things. I mean, this is a schmoovin' ass game. I don't think I've even seen a game with more insane movement than this. You'll see people doing super jumps, triangle dashes, and so much once you learn it. Mind you, that's on top of stuff like advancing guard, team hyper combos, and so much. This is a game where you could stack supers on top of each other, just covering the screen with all sorts of hell and projectiles, and your opponent could still have the ability to block all of that, turn the match back around, and wipe your ass out. It's beautiful. I'd say this game is very balanced. Sure, there are characters that are obvious S tiers in comparison to others, but that doesn't mean that the game is unbalanced. I think a lot of people tend to misunderstand what balancing means in a fighting game. People tend to say that it means every character is equally powerful, when that can't be the case if every character is using a different tool set. No, it's instead about giving characters their way to be exactly what they are and making each character for different skill levels and sets. Not everyone is going to be good at Virgil. Yes, Virgil is a demon in the game, but I've met people who immediately pick him and I wipe them out instantly because they don't know how to use him. Hell, if you look at the top 8 of most UMVC 3 EVOs, if not all of them, you'll see that there's usually a healthy number of characters that make it into the top 8. With 1 year, exactly 15 characters making it into top 8. That's literally almost half the roster. Maybe to you that sounds small, but that's more than a healthy number of characters making it into the top level play. To give a great example of how balanced this game is, there's an iconic EVO 2015, where the Chilean player Kane Blue River won with the team consisting of Hagar, Hulk, and Sentinel. Now, everyone labeled these characters as just okay, if not below average, until Kane Blue River came in and just completely changed the way people thought these characters functioned. He took these quote-unquote meh characters and won undefeated in the winner's bracket. Let me just say that he did a lot of work and he is commended for his service. Also, if you're talking to an Ultimate Marvel 3 fan, ask them about Hagar's pipe, or the pipe. They'll most likely have a hilarious story about that, or a horror story about getting Hagar's pipe lodged in their character's head. I think Ultimate Marvel 3 has one of the most unique uses of music in all of gaming, if not at least fighting games. How this game uses music is that outside of menu themes or stage themes or other songs, all the songs are character themes. How they work is that the stages have their individual themes, but when a character comes onto screen or a character swaps in, the music will naturally transition into that character's theme. It feels like a character is always making their big entrance, like a character in a comic appearing and changing the battle or the course of the story, and it kicks ass every single time. While I don't think all character themes are made equally in this game, some are just so damn hard. Some of my favorites are Deadpool's, Iron Man's, Doctor Doom's, Spider-Man's, Morgan's, Tron Bones, Virgil. Look, there's a lot of great character themes. The cell shading used for the visual style is just so damn good. This game actually does an interesting thing of animating characters, not as detailed as say other games like Street Fighter 4, but they do that to accommodate the art style and supers. Instead, they rely on the visuals and animating the motions in a more exaggerated way than having things being hyper-detailed animation like, say, Tekken. It's a great style that I could easily describe as very comic booky. It's just so colorful and has so much life to it. It's a game that shows you don't need the most insane graphics or bloom or ray tracing to make a great visual style. You just need a unique vision and the skill to pull it off. Plus, this game has so many particle effects everywhere, but it never feels too much. It feels like every character has their own unique particle effects, if that makes sense. And really, I can say that every character has all these great little animation quirks that give you a great idea of their personality. As someone who's done a bit of animation here and there before, do you know how hard it is to portray a character's personality in little idle animations? That takes some masterful animation work to even portray to the viewer in under a few seconds. Like, seriously, you're basically doing what an author does in a few paragraphs in just a few subtle animations. And that's all I can really say about Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I guess the only complaint I truly have is that there isn't more.
Are you ready, true believers? Capcom and Marvel fans have joined forces once again to bring you back to Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Over 50 new fighters. Brand new costumes. Use new and old fighters together to build the ultimate team. Feel sensational thrills! Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Community Edition.
You didn't think this game wouldn't get mods, did you? Come on, with the fanbase as devoted as MVC fans are, it was bound to have some kind of modding community. But man, the community around Marvel 3 is just... there's something else. Like, there aren't many communities I've seen that try to continuously and peacefully spread the love of their favorite game so much and just adding so much more onto it. I think probably the biggest mod, at least at the time of writing this video, is the Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Community Edition mod. This mod is the ultimate love letter to Marvel vs. Capcom 3, with so many modders, composers, animators, and more all work together to add a metric shit ton more content to this game. This game adds 68 more characters, already onto the large roster of 50. That means, with this mod, the size of the roster reaches over 100 characters, exactly making it 118. And mind you, those 68 characters are all added in without removing a single character from the base game of Marvel 3. To be honest, I have zero idea how they even accomplished this. It's a coding miracle of a project. Hell, it feels borderline unholy with how much they got into this game. I mean, Jury has fucking 125 skins in this game, when most characters in the base game got 6 alternates and a 7th DLC skin. Oh, and you wanna know the craziest part about all this? They're keeping up with the mod and making patches on a frequent basis. Because yes, they want you to play this like how you would a traditional fighting game. This wasn't just a mod that they shat out and left to die. They're actively making tweaks to moves, making sure everything isn't too strong, fixing bugs. I have to say, I salute everyone on this mod. May your names be well remembered in MVC history. Honestly, my only nitpick with the mod is that there are more Capcom characters than Marvel characters, but maybe that's because it's easier to import and change models from a Capcom game than it is to make Marvel characters from other bases or from scratch. There's also a few clone-ish characters, and I say clone-ish because they're not obviously one for one. They may have similar moves, but they're very different in application. Hell, Red She-Hulk should be an obvious She-Hulk clone, but she has a literal dragon install from Guilty Gear. Plus her moveset feels much faster than the base She-Hulk character. Luckily, there's way more unique characters than there are ones that are similar, and I'll add here that there's an intense love for the characters, adding in great alternate costumes, unique themes for some characters, and even putting in a lot of voice lines. If you're an absolute Marvel 3 fiend like I am, then this mod has been waiting for you. It's the thing that you didn't know you needed, but once you play it, you feel like you're ascending. I don't know how else to convince you to play this mod. If you love Ultimate Marvel 3, then this is perfect for you. It's perfect just to give you a little bit more Marvel vs. Capcom action because, well, I doubt we'll be getting any new traditional Marvel vs. Capcom stuff anytime soon. Sure, we did get the Capcom vs. collection, but that's just the classics in a really good package with great netcode. You see, I actually started writing this video for a while now, but right when I was halfway through making it, we were introduced to Marvel ToeDip. Let's be real for a second. This game looks like it's already gonna be a classic. Arc System Works is one of the best studios in fighting games, and they seem to be pulling a lot of influence from Marvel vs. Capcom with their new game. I mean, Dragon Ball FighterZ already had quite a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom influence to begin with, so it only made sense that one of their next games would be a Marvel game. But just for a moment, what if we eventually got a Marvel vs. Capcom 4 in all its glory? The next step after Marvel 3. What would that look like? Well, we all thought Infinite was going to be that, but it went down a different route. And I actually respected what it was trying to do to some extent, but you could tell that something behind the scenes did not let the developers cook as long as they needed to. But what if? Follow me for a moment, and maybe let me fanboy out a bit as I try to give you what I think would be my hypothetical Marvel vs. Capcom 4 roster. Oh, and again, Tokon still looks badass. We're still on the good Marvel fighting game timeline, but just work with me here, alright? Alright, so first allow me to explain some guidelines and rules I've laid out for myself. For one, I'm having the starter roster at 60 characters, 30 for both sides. Now I know that may not be 100% realistic for our current fighting game landscape, but data mine leaks revealed that MVC Infinite was going to have 60 characters at launch, and for the sake of my fantasy, and as well with the assumption that I think this game would be developed for years on end, I'm talking at least like minimum 4 years of just pre-development, we can make the roster around 60 feasibly. 2, I've tried to bring in a lot of iconic and recurring characters from the MVC series into each roster, but also bringing in a lot of newcomers. And believe it or not, even though we have 60 characters at launch, some characters still needed to be cut. Plus, if we just kept the exact same roster from Marvel 3 or Marvel 2, what would make Marvel 4 stand out? You just need to make cuts for each game, but it is what it is. And for the record, I'm making these picks assuming that this would come out sometime in the 2020s, so a lot of the picks I'll make are based on what's big or popular in this current time. So that's over 10 years after Ultimate Marvel 3's release. So this roster might be very different from Marvel 3's, but obviously if you think I'm just gonna do popular picks, I'm not. Of course I'm gonna put in some obscure ass characters, and trust me, you might have not even heard of some of the picks I got up my sleeve. But I'm also not making these picks exclusively on my own favorites, because if I did, at least 50% of the MVC community would look at me like a whack job, and it would also be full of X-Men and Spider-Man characters. Anyways, let's bring this roster together, starting with the returning characters. I'll start with the Marvel side returning characters, because I think a lot of these are no-brainers. So for our Marvel returning cast, we have Wolverine, Cyclops, Storm, Magneto, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Rocket Raccoon, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Venom, Ghost Rider, Doctor Doom, Black Panther, and Deadpool. And that's 15 returning characters for the Marvel side. And all these make complete sense. These are all iconic characters and have all had or have been in major films for the past 20 years. But as you've probably noticed, I did bring back a lot of the X-Men related characters, and I think that's obvious why. The X-Men are a major part of Marvel Comics, and people were justifiably pissed when these characters weren't in MVC Infinite. Me included, I'm a big X-Men nerd. Now for the Capcom side of things, we have a slightly bigger number of returning characters, 16 to be exact. And that's because so many of the characters that are returning are still part of massive Capcom franchises, so it was pretty difficult to cut many of these. And of course, I kept a few that are iconic to the MVC franchise itself. Anyways, let's start. We've got Ryu, Chun-Li, Albert Wesker, Mega Man Classic, Zero, Tron Bone, Monster Hunter, Dante, Beautiful Joe, Amaterasu, Strider Hiryu, Frank West, Morrigan, Rad Spencer, Phoenix Wright, and Mike Haggard. As you can see, a lot of these characters are pretty iconic to either the MVC franchise or to Capcom itself. I doubt I'd have to explain why most of these characters are here, except maybe Mega Man Classic. And I'll explain here that Mega Man X was the one chosen for MVC-I, and while that doesn't bother me because Mega Man X is one of my favorite games of all time, Mega Man is one of Capcom's longest running series and has various different series and eras. But I felt it was only right to bring in Mega Man Classic, but I was debating with myself for a while to actually bring in Mega Man EXE because I know that that series is big too. But I think Mega Man Classic has the better rep there. Oh, and as for why Beautiful Joe is there, I just really like Beautiful Joe. That was my one selfish pick on the main roster, okay? I can have at least one of those, right? But let's get on to the newcomers. So with each newcomer, I'll try to give an explanation as to why I picked them, and maybe give an idea to how I think they'd play. And trust me, some of these picks will make you either go, hell yeah, or who? Let's start with the Marvel newcomers. First, the Marvel side will have 15 newcomers because 30 for each side. So there's a bit more to get together, starting with Star-Lord. Okay, I think we all know why Star-Lord is here. He's the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is probably the most beloved and respected film trilogy in the entirety of the MCU. It's at least my favorite series in the MCU. And for a while I was wondering who I put here. Do I put in Drax? Groot? No, we already have big strength characters like Venom and Hulk. Do we put in Gamora? No, we already have enough sword characters as it is. But Star-Lord? That could work. He could be a mix of a Zoner and a Rekka character in my opinion. To explain a little bit, Zoners are characters that use projectiles as their main tools. Basically, they play keep away. And Rekka characters are ones that have special moves that combo into each other or are made in segments to do multiple inputs. Basically very combo heavy type characters. So Star-Lord would mix his projectiles and combos together to be a speed menace. Maybe even having a mechanic where he could change the special effect of his projectiles like how he does in the comics and games. Anyways, next up is Nightcrawler. I'm gonna be real, why hasn't Nightcrawler been in a fighting game yet? He'd be perfect for one. Of course he'd use his iconic cutlass swords, or are they scimitars? Anyways, he'd teleport around and attack. I mean, it's Nightcrawler. Everyone likes Nightcrawler. Loki. Another super self-explanatory pick. I mean, you could do so much with him. Maybe you could use his trickster god elements to play around with your opponent, or maybe you could pull influence from that really good Loki show in Disney Plus and use some of his time powers. But seriously, another pick that I'm surprised hasn't been in already. Silver Surfer. The last few MVC games had very little Fantastic Four representation, and in my roster, I plan to rectify that. And while I'll spoil it here, I'm not going to put in all the Fantastic Four. I think putting Silver Surfer into the main roster is a perfect substitute for the missing members we'll have. And plus, he'd make for a great range character. Maybe he's not like Star-Lord, but something that's very interesting, a very dynamic zoner. Mr. Fantastic. As I previously said, we need to put more Fantastic Four rep into our Marvel vs. Capcom games. And who better to pick than Mr. Fantastic himself? Plus, we don't really have too many characters who could stretch or even be a special type of grappler. So why not have Mr. Fantastic be that? A specialized ranged grappler. Could be pretty cool. The Thing. And here's our last Fantastic Four rep. While many of you would probably argue this character would be a grappler, if you actually read the Fantastic Four comics, Ben Grimm is actually a boxer. It's one of his key features. Hell, Marvel Rivals seems to understand this. So instead, what if we made him a bit of a tanky rushdown character? Kind of imagine how Marissa plays in Street Fighter 6, but more extreme. Swarm. Remember Swarm? No? Alright, I know this is a relatively unknown character, but hear me out. Swarm is a living hive mind of bees with a human consciousness as a controller inside the hive mind. I mean, come on, that sounds like it'd be fun. That's a hilariously wild character to play as. Who wouldn't want to play as what is essentially a very angry swarm of bees in a trench coat? Okay, well, it's a cloak, but still, it would be hilarious. The Punisher. Again, this one is just obvious. I mean, it's the Punisher. Everyone knows about the character at this point, and respectfully, I do think we should add more characters from the edgier, darker side of Marvel in this game. Now, while I don't want to add too many gun characters into this game, I feel like nobody would be upset if we added in Punisher. Blade. So while this one is a popular pick, it's also a selfish one because I love Blade. I like his comics and I really like the first two Blade films, but especially the first one. I don't know why, I just really like that film. But I'm also genuinely surprised that Blade has never been in a Marvel game. The first two games were made during the time when Blade was arguably one of the biggest faces of the Marvel brand. Plus, let's be real, Blade and Dante being in the same game, that's a match made in heaven. That basically has rivalry written all over it. Howard the Duck. Hell yeah, Howard the Duck, baby. Now, I know what you all are thinking. Why Howard the Duck? Well, I think Howard is a big part of Marvel history. Maybe I'm incorrect in my statement, but I'm certain he was the first comedic character in Marvel's canon. Well, at least the first character built purely for satire. Anyways, I think he'd just be a fun character to put in, and with how insane Howard's history is, there's a lot you could pull from. I mean, the guy is a private investigator, a master martial artist, and even has had training in the mystic arts by Doctor Strange. There's a lot you can do with this character. Hela. I wanted to add more characters from Thor's lore, and Hela is currently a surprising new favorite amongst film and comic fans. And to be honest, she's a cool character who's practically built to be a badass villain character. Plus, with her powers over the dead, she could have a great moveset surrounding summoning the dead or doing all sorts of summoning mechanics. She would just be really cool to add in. Daredevil. Do I have to explain this one? It's Daredevil. He's one of the most beloved characters that come out of Marvel Comics, period. He's not my favorite Marvel hero, but he is a favorite hero to many for very good reason. And like, the Punisher is already here, so we should obviously add in Daredevil as well. Plus, again, just like Punisher, how has he not been in a Marvel game yet? Jeff the Landshark. You know, when I was first creating this roster, it was like months in advance, far before Marvel Rivals had even been out. And Jeff, at that point, was just a character popular to the comics, but now he's everywhere. And while I despise Jeff players in Marvel Rivals, I have to give props because the game put the character into the public atmosphere. It was kind of crazy. And as for Jeff's moveset, you could do a lot. I could imagine him being a bit of a rushdown character, small, fast, with a health bar made of tinfoil. Basically, Jeff combos would go wild. But you'd have to be good at the game or very devoted to the character to actually be good at him. Deathlock. Hey, Deathlock. You don't remember Deathlock? Okay, I can only do this bit so many times. Hey, I did say I'd be putting in some deep cut characters, and with a roster of 60, I think we could slide in a good few of them in here. And Deathlock is a character that is very distinctly a 90s character, which is an era of comics that I think is overly shitted on. Sure, it was an era that was edgy, very dark, very grim. I don't think we need that all the time, but what's wrong with a bit of edge here and there? So, Deathlock, what's his whole vibe, his gimmick? Well, for starters, there's actually been 3 Deathlocks. Technically 4, but that's timey-wimey shenanigans. Anyways, the Deathlock I'm choosing to put in is the second one, and probably the most popular one from my understanding, which is Michael Collins. Essentially, this is the guy that was made Deathlock in the 90s comics, which is not the original Deathlock, which was actually originally written in the 70s. So, more or less, the idea of Deathlock is this. Every man who's been made into Deathlock has been a man who has died and turned into a cyborg killing machine. And before you say, that's the plot of RoboCop, the first Deathlock comic came out in 1974, so it's not just a ripoff. So yes, this would be another gun character, but I think we could really play around with the idea that Deathlock is an undead cyborg killer. And hear me out. Imagine if Deathlock had a unique super, where if you were above 3 meters and you died, you play the usual KO screen, and then suddenly Deathlock would rise back from the dead with half a health bar or something. Something similar to how Jason played in Mortal Kombat X. I think it'd be super cool. Squirrel Girl. So here's the final newcomer in the Marvel roster. And I think this is the perfect character to add here. I mean, who hates Squirrel Girl? She's an incredibly hard character to hate. Plus, I think she'd have a hilarious level 5 super. I know I'm probably stealing this idea from the channel Dorgy's Arcade, but let me explain. You see, in the comics, there's this running gag with Squirrel Girl where she defeats mega powerful characters off-panel, or I guess in film terms, off-screen. So if you have 5 bars a meter, imagine a hilarious super which basically has the screen cut to black, you hear the sounds of Squirrel Girl attacking, and then the opponent is just gone. It'd be hilarious. And that's really all for the Marvel side of the roster. Obviously, I think I have a good list, but before you judge, let me give you the newcomers for the Capcom side of the roster. So, let's start with Leon S. Kennedy. It is an actual crime that Leon has never been in a Marvel vs. Capcom game. And the crazy part is, Leon is perfect for the series. I mean, he's got such a large assortment of moves, tools, and other things that could make for a great fighting game moveset. Do I even need to explain any further? Put Leon in the game. Lady Dimitrescu. I was actually debating whether either to put this character here or Mr. X. Now, while I do love Nemesis, the reason I swapped him out for Lady D is because I think we could still keep a large Resident Evil character, but pick one that's more popular with current audiences. And while I think Mr. X has more meme potential, his moveset wouldn't be too different from Nemesis. So I went with Lady D because 1, this character is super popular, and 2, I think it's a good idea to have a representative from one of the more recent Resident Evil games. That and, let's be real, putting this character in basically assures that we get mad money off the Gooners. Cynical decisions aside, I think she's a super unique character by Capcom standards, and she'd likely have a very interesting moveset. Regina. So apparently Dino Crisis is a mega popular series amongst Capcom fans, and this isn't me pulling stuff out of my ass. A couple years back, Capcom had a poll asking fans what franchises they'd love to see come back, and while I'm not the biggest Dino Crisis fan, man, they just came out of the woodworks to vote for their favorite franchise. And you know what? I gotta respect the hell out of that. I hope you get your new game soon, because I'm getting a new Onimusha, and the joy I get from that should be felt by all people at least once. Anyways, Regina is the primary protagonist of the Dino Crisis franchise, and I think she's already got some cool moves made out for her. It'd be kinda like a mix of how Frank West plays and how Jill Valentine played in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. But substitute those characters using zombies as weapons for dinosaurs, which automatically makes her at least 5 times cooler, because who wouldn't want to play as a character who has velociraptors attack their opponents? Lord Raptor. Getting away from survival horror characters and just into horror characters, we have Lord Raptor from the Darkstalkers franchise. And allow me to be a bit selfish here, but Lord Raptor is my favorite character from Darkstalkers. You know what? I'm not even going to give you a moveset suggestion. Let me just give you some of Lord Raptor's lore, and I think you'll agree this character is too badass to leave out. So, Lord Raptor wasn't always the undead demon that he is, but originally an Australian metal guitarist called the God of Metal. And he sold gangbusters of albums, like his first week sales were 200k, which is big, until he mysteriously died, where he kinda just stopped a live show, held his guitar into the air and said, "Emperor Ozam, I have given you all that you have asked, now it is my turn to receive." Which then he immediately fell apart, turning into nothing but a pile of bleached bones, and then the whole crowd, every single fan, had the blood drained from their body. Later, the police went to his home and found a book called A Chapter of Talagido, which mentioned words like Makai and had other things to say on demonology. Then they also found the lyrics he performed for his last song called Sacrifice. So yeah, Lord Raptor then basically went to Makai, or Hell, or whatever the hell it's called, and basically was blessed in darkness by Emperor Ozam. Now, while the Demon King Ozam wants to use Raptor as a tool and a pawn, Raptor has his own plans to basically overthrow him and become a new Demon Lord in the underworld. All I'm saying is, this is a perfect rival for Ghost Rider. And on top of that, he can turn his legs into chainsaws. Yeah, this character's too cool to be left out. Jury. Again, putting Jury in Marvel vs. Capcom is just a no-brainer. She's probably like the most popular Street Fighter character to come out in like the past 10 to 20 years. And since she's already a Street Fighter character, her moveset would pretty much translate over almost one for one with just a couple tweaks here and there. Batsu Ichimonji. Now for some of you, this is a huh, but I know for a few of those people watching, this is a hell yeah moment. I was either debating to put in Batsu or Akira Kazuma from rival schools, but Batsu's already been in a versus game. Not Marvel vs. Capcom, but Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. So we'd already have a strong basis for his moves in a Marvel game because TVC is not too different from Marvel vs. Capcom, excluding some differences here and there. Edward Falcon. Another character going back to a Capcom fighting game classic, but instead of rival schools, it's Power Stone. And man, Power Stone fans are just a joy because they love these two games so much. Now, while I was debating to either put in Edward or Rogue, I decided on Edward because of one reason. You see, in Power Stone, one of the core parts of each match is to collect Power Stones, and when you get them all, you activate a super-powered state. You see, the interesting thing about Edward Falcon's powered-up state is that it's a mechanical armored suit called Red Whirlwind. Top that with the fact that Edward Falcon is the son of a famous archaeologist, and thus uses his family fortune to fund his own adventures across the world. Wouldn't that make him a perfect rival for Iron Man? You could also give him a fun arcade mode ending where he accidentally collects all the Infinity Stones, or Infinity Gems if you're trying to be super accurate to the comics, because he mistook them for Power Stones. Plus, Power Stone fans need to eat, they starving out here. Nero. This is yet another character that definitely should have already been in a Marvel vs. Capcom game. It also helps that Nero is my favorite character in the Devil May Cry series. Dante is great, but I find a lot more out of Nero due to things like relatability and just kind of preferring his vibe. But anyways, you could do so much if you put Nero into the game. I mean, hell, alone the Devil Breaker mechanics are just gonna make him wild. But adding everything else? You might have a fan favorite character here. The Arisen. And here we have a character from a recent popular Capcom series, Dragon's Dogma. And before you say, wouldn't this play like Monster Hunter? No, they wouldn't. Sure, they'd have swords, spears, and so on, but the Arisen can also use magic as well as things called pawns, essentially making this character a summon character. Basically, this character would have to summon on characters onto the field, and basically this character would have extra assists as special inputs, and they could achieve all sorts of different things. Though they'd either be stronger or weaker depending on how the developers would balance it, but it could be really cool. Asura. Look, if there's a character that just fits Marvel vs. Capcom, it's Asura. I know this game came out like over a decade ago at this point, but if you're either someone who played this game or watched someone else play this game, it's super unique and pretty unforgettable. Asura would be an insane rushdown character sending blow after blow after blow. And you see, the whole thing about Asura is that he rebels against the gods and demigods of this world, basically getting disrespected by their corrupt actions, and he goes out of his way to avenge his family and himself. Now, is there a character on the Marvel side that is a servant of a god? Or maybe even a herald? Yeah, let's be real, if any character was set up as the perfect rival for Asura, it's Silver Surfer. Plus, opposing Silver Surfer's calm, introspective personality with Asura's all-consuming rage would make for just a great rivalry. Miyamoto Musashi. First off, I'm a big fan of the Onimusha games, and while I've only played the first two, I just adore them. There's just something about how these games are set up that just makes them so tantalizing for me. But the issue is that we can't really use the main characters of Onimusha 1 and 2 because they use the likenesses of real actors. But there is that new Onimusha coming out, and the historical figure that's the main character of that game is Miyamoto Musashi. Seriously, if you're a history guy like me, then this man is just wild. He's debatably the most important samurai to ever live. And while we haven't seen too much about how this new Onimusha would play, I think you could still easily make a great character out of this. Sissel from Ghost Trick, Phantom Detective. This Capcom game is a beloved cult classic, and while I haven't played it, I think you could make a super unique character out of Sissel. I mean, he's a literal ghost who manipulates the environment to solve puzzles. So how could we adapt that into a moveset? I think the Marvel vs. Capcom developers could easily figure it out. After all, we've gotten Phoenix Wright and Frank West in Marvel 3 alone. You could easily make Sissel work too. Devilot from Cyberbots, Full Metal Madness. I think what this roster has been missing so far is a joke character. And yes, I don't count Howard the Duck as a joke character. Now, while many of us in the West might not know who this character is, Devilot is super popular in Japan, and I can't say I don't see why. She's a goofy, fun character with incompetent henchmen, always trying to use mechs, devices, or bombs to take over the world, but always ends up biting her in the ass due to her own misplanning or henchman's stupidity. Think of a dynamic similar to Team Rocket or Skeletor from He-Man. She could be fun, and while I've tried to pair up some characters into rivalries, I think I have the perfect rival for Devilot. Dr. Doom. But hear me out. Doom doesn't even notice that Devilot exists, but Devilot hates him because he tends to be far more successful as a villain than her. Come on, that could be made for some comedic gold. Ryu, from Breath of Fire. Okay, I know, 2 characters named Ryu. Yeah, I know, but hear me out. Breath of Fire is a foundational Capcom series, and it used to be one of the big faces of Capcom as a company. You see, the Breath of Fire games are traditional turn-based RPGs, but with heavy emphasis on dragons. Now, dragons are not my favorite fantasy creature, but the way these games use dragons is just super unique. You see, in each game, there is a Ryu, which is the main character you play as. Now, if he's just reincarnating is up for debate, but each one is a dragon that takes on a human form, and this allows for some super unique moves. Specifically, I want to pull from Breath of Fire 3, where Ryu had the ability to combine together genes during combat, and combining these genes together would turn him into different forms of dragons. And I have a pretty interesting mechanic on how to turn that into a gameplay mechanic for a fighting game. So, anyone here ever played BlazBlue, or BlazBlue, however you want to pronounce it? If you haven't, that's fine, but there's a character called Nine the Phantom. Basically, every move she does counts as a different elemental spell, and then later when she does a bigger move or a bigger input, she uses these elements, combines them together, and makes an even bigger move, a bigger blast, an earthquake, whatever it is, based on what you put in. Now, what if we took that, but instead of turning elements into bigger moves, Ryu has different special inputs that count as different elements like lightning, fire, etc. And depending on how much meter you have, you could turn into different dragons, kind of like a dragon install from Guilty Gear. Now, I say that this should start with at least 2 meters minimum, because in Breath of Fire 3, mixing 2 genes together made you just a lower level, weaker dragon. But then if you had 3 meters, you could combine 3 elements together to become a much stronger, more epic powered dragon, just like Breath of Fire 3 does with 3 genes. And to be honest, this would just make a great character to add in. And yeah, that's all 60 characters. Yup. Nah, I'm fucking with you. Come on, this is 2025. Did you really think a game as big as Marvel vs. Capcom 4 wouldn't get DLC? And I think you might like some of the picks I have stored up. So, let's get started with the DLC. Now, I want to put here, I've decided to pick characters to slot into 4 seasons of DLC, each consisting of 4 DLC characters per season. Because, let's be real, with how popular Marvel vs. Capcom is, giving this game only 4 seasons is being rather generous. It'd probably be rather closer to 5, but 4 seems like a reasonable number. And as for why it's 4 characters per season, well, Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, and a lot of other fighting games have kind of made that the standard for DLC releases. So that makes it easier for me because that means each season you'll have at least 2 Marvel characters and 2 Capcom characters. It's perfectly balanced, as all things should be. But anyways, let's get on to the list. Season 1. Virgil. Yep, that's right, of course I'm gonna make Virgil DLC, are you kidding me? This man is an S-tier demon, and to be honest, I think this move isn't too terrible to make, mainly because no one wants to see Zero May Cry teams immediately at the start of MVC4, and we could even tweak him to be closer to his Devil May Cry 5 counterpart in the meantime. Plus, it would allow the meta to settle into itself, and we could even tweak Virgil to work better and worse even, technically, in some cases, just to make the game a bit more balanced. Spider-Man. Miles Morales. To be completely transparent, I was debating with myself for a bit to put either Miles here or 2099 Miguel O'Hara. Now, Miguel O'Hara is my favorite Spider-Man right behind Peter, and I do think Miles and Miguel would have drastically different movesets compared to Peter since each of them have their own distinct powers and stories. But I went with Miles because I bet for a lot of kids now, Miles is their Spider-Man, and I don't want to take that away from them. Besides, I already have my Spider-Man in the game. I'll also say I didn't add Miles to the main roster because Peter and Venom were already part of the main roster and I didn't want to have 3 separate web slingers in the main roster, you see what I mean? But I think making Miles available by Season 1 alleviates that issue. Ada Wong. This is yet another popularity pick. I mean, it's Ada Wong. She fits in that same bubble as Leon to me because I'm surprised she hasn't been in a Marvel game yet. You could do so much with her poison darts, guns, all sorts of martial arts and grapples, grappling hook. You could do so much with her. And last we have Cable. And here we have another iconic face in the MVC franchise. Cable was pretty much the face of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. He was a powerful top tier character with a really cool moveset, but I think at this point most people know who Cable is because of Deadpool 2. So yeah, this is an easy pick. Season 2. Phoenix. Jean Grey. Phoenix is here in Season 2 for the exact same reason Virgil was reserved for Season 1 DLC. You want your S tier? Then wait for DLC. But like Virgil, I think taking some time to help develop Phoenix for DLC would help allow the game to form its own new meta. This would also make adding Phoenix back into the game a big moment. Now we can add her in and see how people would evolve and develop their teams with this character now in the game. Plus, so much has happened in the comics since then, and like Virgil, this character would probably be extremely different from their Marvel vs. Capcom 3 counterpart. Basically a new character, but similar to the old one we like, but drastically different as well. Akuma. Yeah, I know, maybe making Akuma DLC for some seems blasphemous, but I didn't want to run into the issue of having so many Street Fighter characters in the main roster because, hoo boy, Marvel vs. Capcom 2's roster is like 60% Street Fighter. Now, that's not a bad thing, but variety is the spice of life. But now that we're in DLC territory, we can skirt around that rule just a bit and slide in Akuma. And I mean, hey, it's Akuma, do I gotta say more? Dr. Octopus. Now, here I wanted to add another iconic villain, and to be honest, there were a few Spider-Man villains I was tossing around here because, well, Spider-Man has some of the most iconic villains in all of comics, and while I do think Green Goblin would be badass, something kept telling me to put Dr. Octopus here. I kind of feel like he'd make for a much more interesting surprise and have a more unique moveset than Goblin. I mean, he'd make for a very interesting, very kind of range-ish character, or maybe even a mid-range character. I wouldn't really know, but I'm imagining something pretty interesting with him. And last but not least, we have Ruby Hart, an iconic character of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and also more or less the face of Capcom for that game. And look, I think pirates are really cool, and I really liked her moveset and all the sorts of unique things she does in Marvel 2. And I wanted to put her in with Cable because I think MVC 2 fans deserved a bone by this time. Season 3. In Season 3, we're going to start by dropping Dr. Wily. Because, look, that's a crazy pick. And I think in recent years, Capcom hasn't been giving Mega Man much love outside of constant re-releases, so this is a way for me to drum up some interest in Mega Man characters. And come on, you know you'd be fucking hyped if you saw Dr. Wily as a character in a Marvel vs. Capcom game. MODOK. So I will admit, I kinda hopped back and forth here between either putting in MODOK or Ultron, but I went with MODOK because simply, I like MODOK more. Even after they butchered him in Ant-Man 3. It was not a good look, but I love MODOK. Plus, I think MODOK is a much more iconic character to Marvel vs. Capcom than Ultron, so why not bring it back? Plus, he'd make a great complement to Wily, who is also a robotic-themed mad scientist. Sanada Yukimura. As I was making this DLC, I noticed there was one big Capcom franchise missing from the main roster, and I couldn't find a main reason to add him in the main roster, but with DLC I think he'd slide in better. You see, I've never played a Sengoku Basara game, but I've heard this series is very popular in the East. I was thinking of either adding in Oichi or Date Masamune, but I feel like there's already characters that kind of accomplish what they'd add to the game already. But Sanada uses the coolest medieval combat weapons, spears and polearms. And you don't really see a lot of spear boys in fiction just in general, and damn it, we need more spear boys in fiction. Plus, from what I've seen of Sengoku Basara, it's pretty similar to Dynasty Warriors, so you could do some crazy moves from that. And the final DLC character we have for Season 3 is Null. And let's be honest, a lot of people would salivate at the mouth of playing Null. And while he is a more recent character, he's just a really cool character and ties into more recent events in the comics. Plus, he's like this big, dark, eldritch god type character, and he would be fun. I was thinking of here to put in Apocalypse, but we'll get to why I didn't put him in the next season. And you know, for the new fans who haven't seen Null, they'd go, who is that? Who is this walking metal album cover? Season 4. Moon Knight. So we're starting Season 4 with Moon Knight. Originally, this slot was going to Rogue, but then I noticed there's a lot of X-Men representation in this game's DLC. In fact, I changed a few DLC slots because on second look, I noticed that like half the DLC slots for Marvel characters were X-Men related characters. And I don't want to hoard the DLC as an excuse to put in all my favorite X-Men. That's not really fair. But if there's another character I love, it's Moon Knight. And despite the fact I didn't really like the Disney Plus show, I think Moon Knight is still a great character who needs more love. There's so much you could do with him, but yeah, Moon Knight is your first DLC Marvel character for Season 4. Next up, we got Godo. I bet you're surprised that Miles Edgeworth isn't here, and yeah, I love Miles too, but I think he'd play pretty similar to Phoenix Wright. Though, I'll be honest, I've only played the first Ace Attorney game, so correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I also know Godo is a very popular prosecutor in that series, and from what I've seen, I just like his vibe, his look, his style, and I'd bet he'd be a very intriguing character to play as and also play very differently from Phoenix. The Sentry. So, as I said earlier, I was kind of writing this roster for a while. In fact, I had most of the roster decided before I even wrote this video, and I still had to change a lot around. But here I wanted to add a character that is popular in the comics but is distinctly popular to the comics, in a way that just kind of feels like a deep cut. And the Sentry is what I decided on, because the Sentry is a very unique character, even by comic standards. And I was like, yeah, the Sentry, people would really like this, and it could be a cool way to introduce a lot of new fans to his books. And then the Thunderbolts came out. But fuck it, the Sentry deserves to be here. He's probably the most interesting character Marvel has released in the last 20 years. Though on any other day, this slot could have been Miss Marvel or Gwenpool, and while I love that original Gwenpool series, I think the Sentry would make for a much more unique character. The final DLC of a fighting game is always a unique gamble. You've got to pick something that'll give your game at least one massive pulse to drag people back to the game one last time. Smash Ultimate definitely understood this when making Sora its final DLC character, and that was a great pick. But how would we do that for an NBC game? Simple. Cuteness is a powerful drug. And what's cuter than cats with weapons? Look, I'm not a big Monster Hunter guy at all. I've tried to get into it, and either I just wasn't interested or the people I knew were just really fucking toxic about the game. But Palicos? How could any human being hate Palicos? It's just too damn cute and too damn funny to hate. And that's it. That's all we got for our fictional MBC4. And damn, this video is probably long as hell. I mean, as I'm writing the script, it was still massive even without my hypothetical Marvel vs. Capcom 4 roster. And part of me doesn't want this video to end. I love this game so much, but for now, I'll leave it here. I hope in the future I can come back to this game and make a different video, because I definitely could. But I wanted to share my love of this game to the world. And really, that's partly why I started this channel in the first place. I wanted to share my joy, my thoughts, my criticisms, the way I think, to the world in a very safe, contained environment. Maybe I'm being too sentimental, but this game really does inspire me to do more. And the community around it reminds me that people are still good and very passionate. It's hard to remember that sometimes, because the world, especially right now, is a chaotic, scary place at times. But I find solace in this game, and it inspires me to do more in my own little ways. So, all I gotta say is, do you agree with me? Do you not? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you liked the video, hopefully you shared it, commented it, and so on. And with all that being said, I'll see you next time.